I've got some news for you. I've discovered there's a little bit of factionalism in the LP. We have radicals, we have purists, we have pragmatists, we have anarchists, we have minarchists, don't we? In fact, the only party, perhaps, with more caucuses than people. What a joke. But one of the interesting and legitimate, let's say, tensions, perhaps, within the party, is between those who, looking to the past of the party, past, you have to translate British into American, looking back to the past of the party, think the really primary purpose of the LP is to educate. Increasingly, there are people who think the primary purpose of the LP is to win elections. And I certainly sense that there's some tension there. But whatever side of that debate you're on, if indeed it is a debate, you want to do this. Whether you're in the business of education or whether you're here for winning elections, I think you believe that what the LP is about, what the liberty movement more broadly has to be about, is creating a cultural paradigm shift with a political outcome. Otherwise, why are we here, right? So doing that is what this talk is about. Now, I love my quotes, and I like to start my presentations with quotes. This quote is by a guy called Gustave Le Bon. Has anybody read Gustave Le Bon? Okay, if you are in this room and you actually want to do liberty, go read Gustave Le Bon. He was a Frenchman writing in the 19th century. He was arguably the first psychologist of crowds. He wrote The Psychology of Revolutions. He wrote about crowd psychology, what people do in mass movements. And he said this: a people cannot choose its institutions until it has transformed its mind. And in that quote, you kind of have the unification, right, of potentially the two purposes, or maybe you only think there's one, of the LP, which is to change the public's mind with a view, hopefully, to changing our institutions for the better, for more liberty. So, here's, I was going to say the premise, but since David Hume, another Brit, a philosopher, a few hundred years ago, said this, it has been proved true in discipline after discipline after discipline. As reasoning is not the source whence either disputant derives his tenets, it is in vain to expect that any logic which speaks not to the affections will ever engage him to embrace sounder principles. This was David Hume telling you why your Facebook arguments don't win converts 300 or 400 years before Facebook. This is a problem for libertarians. We've all been there, right? Libertarians, interestingly, psychologically, have a profile closer to that of progressives than conservatives. Although in America, libertarian politics is deemed to be more closely aligned politically with conservatism. Psychologically, libertarians, being high in openness, low in conscientiousness, low in neuroticism, right? These are the big five personality dimensions, are actually much more like progressives. But we differ from everybody, but especially progressives, in these two respects. We are higher in systematization. We like our logic, right? We all believe we've come to our libertarian views rationally, and we're low in empathy. That's actually the result of studies. That's just not me drawing on anecdotal evidence. So basically then, if it is the case that, as David Hume says, that it's not logic, it's not reasoning alone that causes people to derive their tenets, in other words, to change their minds about important things, we need to look to this, we need to be aware of this. Right, now, so okay, how do you get a nation, a large number of people, to change their mind about something? We have all the good ideas in the world, we're libertarians. But actually, the study of how those ideas get accepted or rejected by populations, of course, is the study of history, right? History is not a laboratory experiment, but it's where we get our data from. I like to say, as a political psychologist, that in a way, history, crudely, is political psychology writ large, right? So, if we're interested in causing changes, let's look to where changes have happened to history. And indeed, whatever you think about this guy, Winston Churchill, and I'm really loading it with Brits at the front end, he was right on this quote, I think, which he said to an American speechwriter: study history, history, history. In history lies all the secrets of statecraft. Whatever you think of him, he did change the world. Okay, Alright, so back to Gustave Le Bon, the psychologist of revolutions and crowds. The memorable events of history, he says, are the visible effects of the invisible changes of human thought. And if you think about it, I think that basically has to be true, right? Because what people will is a function of the thoughts they've had, the things they feel, the ideas they hold, the things they deem important. So, if we're in the room for liberty, we might want to ask, for example, what do these huge changes in nations have in common, if anything? American independence. That was a big pro-liberty move. Well done, guys. End of slavery. End of racial segregation. Brexit. There's plenty of them. I'm sure you can think of loads throughout history. I mean, I should say that my study of history is confined to the English-speaking world. So, like, I'm pretty confident about what I'm going to assert with respect to English-speaking history. Culture precedes politics. So, you know, different languages, different cultures, I'm not speaking to them. But I am speaking to the English-speaking world. Right, so, just to kind of frame this, top level, I want to suggest that there are two causes of major political shifts to liberty. Basically two, they all fall under these two. One, people cause political change to protect their own liberties, right, their own liberties, when a critical mass feel that a right they take for granted and exercise in everyday life, so they get to experience it day to day, the exercising of this right, is about to be taken from them. That's number one. This is actually typically the important one for political campaigns. I talk a lot about this to candidates when they go through my candidate training for messaging and political branding. Just to give you an example, the NDAA and the Patriot Act, many liberty guys, including me, were screaming from the rooftops, and for me that meant writing articles, right, and Huffington Post, and Foundation for Economic Education, or whatever I write, writing books, right, about, for example, the tyranny represented by the Patriot Act and the NDAA. They're not the only two, but they're two pretty egregious in our recent history. Would you agree? Yeah, okay. And did you see all the marches in the streets? All the civil disobedience? No. Why not? Because there wasn't any. There wasn't any. The right to due process. It was not hyperbolic to say this goes back to Magna Carta. It actually goes back before Magna Carta. Remember 1014 from the trivia quiz night? Yeah, it goes back before Magna Carta. Basic rights like due process, and others equally basic, right? Habeas corpus, you know, etc., have been taken away or violated, let's say, to be more accurate, by the NDAA and the Patriot Act. No marches on the streets. And yet, in contrast, the most successful tax resistance movement in the United States, as of the time I put these slides together a year or so ago, was the vaping community. State after state is trying to tax vaping fluid. And as of about a year ago, right, in every state, the anti-vaping fluid tax movement has succeeded to prevent the taxation of that. Now, which is bigger, habeas corpus, right to due process, or getting your vaping fluid without paying a few extra cents? Now, rights are rights. This better be good, because I'm flowing, man.
It's happening right now in Wisconsin. They're trying to push the vape tax to 71%.
Okay, so there you go. So Wisconsin has to step up and perform as well as every other state. You're right, they've tried it in every state. So Wisconsin, I'm sorry to tell you, you're not unique. Thanks for that piece of info. But this has been very successful. Now, why would people be more successful, more rapid, protecting the right to have their vaping fluid not taxed than the right to due process? Right. If you're not needing due process, which nearly everybody does not nearly every day of their lives, the taking away of the right is a political abstraction. It's abstract, right? They're not coming for you. If you're a vapor, right? If that's part of your, let's say, your subculture, if you're part of that community, if your friends do that, they're coming for you. They're coming for the people like you, right? It feels different. Now that's important. That relates to the first cause of major political shift to liberty, right? People resisting your coming into my life. Right? And I'm going to change my everyday experience. My tomorrow will be different from my yesterday. If you succeed, I'm going to stop you. This talk is going to be about the second one, which is kind of even bigger, because it operates in the culture rather than just politically. It precedes politics. Culture precedes politics. Lots of people have said this. Breitbart famously said it. Koerner famously said it, right? So, which is broadly true. This goes back to Gustav's point. You change the minds of the people and the institutions change. To put it maybe another way, for our purposes, people part of the political party, we know that we're getting screwed by power and politics all the time. But to a large extent, the Overton window idea applies. They will only do to us what they can get away with. What they can get away with is a function of what's normalized or not in our culture. So how do you change the culture? People cause political change to protect others' liberties. The first one was the right. Now I'm talking about everyone's, right? So changing the culture. When, number one, a critical mass, that's important, are exposed to a mass popularized, has to be mainstream, story, that's important, so I'm talking narrative, about an injustice that's very important, against a specific person or people. That's important. A specific person or a small number of people that elicits immediate empathy, also super important, unmediated by any ideology. In other words, when I hear the story about the injustice done to this person, I've got to react viscerally, not because I'm a libertarian, or a socialist, or a Democrat, or a Republican, but because I'm a human being. When you've got that, you can move a culture. So let's go to some examples, right? Now, here's my little historical sweep. I'm going to build this case. And I'm going to start building in the 16th century. Because I tell you, in any century you can find this in spades operating. Now, this is the reason why we are living in a Protestant country. This is the reason why the English people were Protestant, not Catholic. The atmosphere became anti-absolutist and Protestant thanks to a bestseller in 1563. A bestseller which satisfied all the conditions that I am asserting we need to satisfy with the culture. It was in the form of a book called Acts and Monuments by a guy called John Fox. Because of the content of the book, it was given the nickname, it came to be known as Fox's Book of Martyrs. It was a book that went mainstream because it was sold into homes across England, and it was the first time images were available, like on the mass market, for general consumption. Because in this book, for the first time, were woodcut images, and they were images of the martyring of Protestants by the Catholic Queen Mary, right? Bloody Mary. The images went into the homes. Now think about this. This was like, imagine the difference between no internet and internet. This was the difference between no books and a book with pictures. Like literally. The printing press was only invented 80 years before this book hit written, right? That's what we're talking about. Okay. So the pictures were of images, they illustrated stories, that caused a critical mass of people who had the book in the house, to experience in their imagination what was being shown to them in the pictures, because that's how kind of pictures work, right? The suffering of their own countrymen for the first time in English-speaking history. That's quite a thing. This was the most read book after the Bible for 200 years. We're talking mainstream political media. Shoot a start, right? The Queen Mary on the back of this became known as Bloody Mary. And, which is kind of amazing, right? Because her father, Henry VIII, killed more than hundreds of times more people. But he's kind of a hero monarch. He's not Bloody Henry, but she's Bloody Mary. Bloody Mary. Why? Because the propaganda, the mainstream media, had the narrative about what she did, not what about Henry did. And this is one of the woodcuts, right? Lord, receive my spirit. That's a Protestant being burnt at the stake. This has never been seen in England before. And if you think, oh yeah, well, okay, you know, it looks a bit old-fashioned, wouldn't have much effect today, how about this? That pretty much ended the war. It's all the same thing. It's all the same thing. Okay. So, let's go to another big step forward for liberty. Who here has heard of the slave ship called Zong? Anyone heard of Zong? See, it's interesting. Because we're very into getting our philosophy right. These are the basics. Yeah, this is like the non-aggression principle of getting this stuff into a culture. We should all know this stuff. So thank you for the opportunity to come and share it with you. I appreciate it. So the slave ship Zong its owners were involved in a court case in 1781. Let me tell you how this came about. They were shipping their slaves, I think, to Jamaica, and they decided that a significant number of them, 133, were in such bad condition that it really wasn't worth wasting the food and water on them, right? The economic decision was, cut the losses, let's throw them overboard, so we can make sure that we can get profits on the other slaves that we land. Are you with me? So that's what the owners did. They threw them overboard, and then of course they all died. And so the owners of the slave ship had an insurance policy. They insured you, you're all going to have your contents insurance, right? You're going to insure your goods. So they went to claim for the defunct slaves, it's only property after all, on their insurance policy, because the slaves didn't make it, right? So that was covered. Except the insurance company said it wasn't covered, because they didn't jump and they didn't die on board, which are insurable losses, out of the control of the management. Throwing slaves overboard is a management decision. We don't cover management decisions, sir. So it went to court. And the insurers of the Zong hired for their attorney an abolitionist attorney, before it was cool to be an abolitionist, called Sharpe, who acted for the insurers. Now, here's some quotes from the transcript of the case, just so that you can get a flavour of it. The jury had no doubt that the case of slaves was the same as if it was horses that had been thrown overboard. The necessity for throwing over the Negroes, which perished just as a cargo of goods perished. Now, Sharpe was an abolitionist, so he had political interest in this, and he thought that maybe he could, use this thing that he was involved in, as he used, other things, to try and push for the abolition of slavery. And he made a bit of an effort. He wasn't a great media guy, but he made a bit of an effort, and it had a little bit of an effect. Well, actually, the effect was kind of outsized, you might say, from his skill in manipulating the media. Because what he ended up doing when the story of this trial came out was he actually began, the first official anti-slavery movement in Britain, which was set up by Quakers in response to how disgusted they were by the story of this trial. Now, that alone is interesting, but it gets more interesting, because that wasn't the end of the story. I said that was 1781. 50 years later, Sam Sharpe, a Jamaican slave, and a preacher, circulated reports of the case. He just printed up the story. He saw the power of this story and decided he could make a better job of it than Sharpe. And he started circulating it, this slave, among all his slave friends in Jamaica. They were so appalled by it that there was a uprising so violent that it killed lots of the slavers. The British government couldn't control it. Abolition followed the following year. It made the government give up slavery. Now I ask you this question. How can the story of something that happened to a bunch of slaves 50 years ago be more powerful than what's happening to you when you're a slave? That's some big stuff there, right? Now, what nobody knew back in 1831 is that we have things like mirror neurons. What we now know when we stick people in fMRI brain scans is if you put me in a brain scan and I listen to a story that I have empathy with, which I can't help to do because I'm a human too. So when you describe the human elements of the story, I experience them, like in a neurological sense, as if they were happening to me, right? It can be as less intense, but it's quantitatively the same thing. They didn't know that then, but we know that now, so we know why this works. And if you think, well, Robin, that's not quite enough justification to explain why slaves would be more disgusted by the story of other slaves than what's happening to them, I ask you to consider this for your homework, that you might have been in a relationship that has been abusive, or that you look back on it once you finally got out of it, and you knew you should have left it 3, 5, 7 years before. But when somebody tells you about an abusive relationship they're in, you can completely see the problem immediately and see that they should be out, right? There's stickiness to our current situation because there's a short-term price to pay to getting out. A story can overcome that, and I'm going to give you another example. But before I do, where are we at? Stories cause injustices and oppressions to be experienced in the imagination. That's what I was just saying. Arguments allow them only to be conceived. See the difference? Right? One's a kind of a cellular knowledge, one's a kind of a cognitive knowledge or appreciation. A story reflects a situation and it makes no argument. Remember the first slide, like libertarians, we're very rational, we like our arguments. We really do, we're good at them. But the reason stories are so powerful and change history is because they actually don't even try to make an argument. They just tell you what's so. And they rely on your empathy to change you when you connect to it. Stories engage moral intuitions, as long as they are about one or a few people, so that I can put myself into the story, so that I can't help but put myself in the story when I hear it. Stories can't be ideologically resisted. That woodcut, that photograph of the little girl in Vietnam, the transcripts of the trial, they all might make you very uncomfortable. But you can't just say, I can reject them because I believe the non-aggression principle, or I'm a socialist. Right? Either it happened or it didn't happen. Right? So you cut through the possibility of ideological resistance. Right? This is kind of political persuasion on steroids. You're really doing effective persuasion when you're not doing persuasion. See what I mean? Now, remember those quotes from the trial, just in that box there? Do you guys know Hannah Arendt? She was a Jew that wrote about her experience under the Nazis. And she talked about the banality of evil. I think those quotes, it's the banality of evil. They're not arguments about whether Negroes should be property, which had been being made on both sides for centuries and centuries without effect. This is a case about an insurance claim. The reason it's so powerful is everybody can get there. It doesn't tell you whether they should be property. It tells you the banal details of the situation when they are property. And it has a completely different impact. Is that making sense? Are you following me? I'm getting nods? Okay. Okay. Now, I'm not saying arguments aren't important, but I'm saying we need this too. We need to be much better at this. Now, the other thing, which goes to a lot of what I teach in my political communications classes, that empathic responses aren't the result of conscious processes. Right? They're pre-conscious. Your conscious processes, your arguments, your yeah but, right? Where you take this stuff comes after the intuitive hit, the empathic response. And I've already said that last point, so let me go on. Okay, so we've talked about the end of British slavery. Now I want to talk about the end of American slavery. Now, obviously I am not purporting, because it would be stupid, that this is the thing that ends slavery. What I am purporting is this mainstreaming of narratives is consistently important and not seen for the power that it has. And it was important in massive changes towards liberty in the history of the English-speaking world. So the end of American slavery was helped massively, according to Frederick Douglass and many other people, by a white dude in blackface. And that white dude in blackface was Stephen Foster. You all know him? You know the name? Yeah, okay. He is called the father of American pop. He's the father of pop music. And that is really important. That's why he's in this deck of slides. This minstrel wrote My Old Kentucky Home, in which he humanized slaves for the first time. In other words, he enabled people listening to his songs to empathize with slaves as people, not property. That hadn't been done in mainstream culture before. And I say mainstream culture because Old Kentucky Home was being sung by millions of Southerners across America. Said Frederick Douglass, these are heart songs, and the finest feelings of human nature are expressed in them. They make the heart sad as well as merry, and can call forth a tear as well as a smile. They awaken the sympathies for the slave, in which anti-slavery principles take root and flourish. You can argue the principles all you like, but you've got to have the soil in which they flourish. And most of the art of political persuasion is finding what that soil is for the people you're trying to persuade. That might be one-on-one on a doorstep, or it might be an entire demographic. Maybe that you're trying to get to vote for a candidate. Okay, you get the idea. Now here's another one. I told told you about the power of story, and asked how it could be that stories could be more powerful than something that you're experiencing. Here's another example of a story being more powerful than something you see on every street corner, every day, every week for years. In the late 19th century, London had a problem, which was child sex slavery. And it was all over the place. And what used to happen was poor families would sell their daughters, typically 12, 13, 14 years old, to brothels for use by richer men. And this was something of a welfare system back then. And everybody knew it was going on, because the brothels, you could just walk into them. But it was the dirty secret that everybody wanted to ignore. And they could, until they couldn't. And when they couldn't, it was because a guy called William Stead, who was the editor of the Pall Mall Gazette, Pall Mall being part of London, decided that he was going to take it on. Now, I told you, I've given you a pop song, I've given you a story of a trial, now I'm giving you tabloid journalism. The point is that each one is mainstream, right? Doesn't matter how you mainstream it, you've got to mainstream it. This guy mainstreamed it through his newspaper. And from the beginning of newspapers, it's always been salacious. There's always been that tabloidism to shift copy. And William Stead knew that, and he knew that sex sells, 'twas ever thus, right? Human nature doesn't change, it's why Shakespeare is still good. So he decided to come up with this. He decided, get this, in collaboration with the Salvation Army, that he was going to buy a girl who was 13 years old from her mother, who was poor, to sell on into a brothel, which he did. Now the mother was not in on it. She thought she was selling her daughter to sexual slavery, to prostitution. Forced prostitution, I should say. The Salvation Army knew what was going on. And this was the gig, right? So he got the daughter, her name was Eliza, took her to the brothel and said, you know, I've got a new girl for you, I'm going to sell it to you on the condition that I can be the first customer. So the brothel was very happy with that. She was a young girl, 13 years old. And so he went through the whole thing right up until just to do the act. She screamed, which was the whole point, so he had the details of the story right up to the moment, so nobody could say yeah, but. He literally ran out of the building with her, handed her over to the Salvation Army that put her in protection, and then he wrote up the story. And he wrote up the story, and he actually did it in a series of stories, right, under the overarching title of The Maiden Tribute of Modern Babylon. And each, edition, he had another salacious title. So one of the editions had Violation of Virgins. The next one was Strapping Girls Down. So it was heavy stuff for 1885, right? You can imagine how it sold, and it did sell. And all he was doing was describing exactly what was going on 10 feet from the faces of everybody who was walking the streets of London for years. But now they couldn't ignore it, because now it was there, right? It was engaging the empathy. It was exciting. It's why tabloid journalism works, because you're there. It's voyeuristic. So, he had a lot of sales, and it had the desired effect. There was a nationwide uproar. Fearing riots, the Home Secretary asked Stead to cease publication. And he said, have you got a bill ready to make this illegal that you're going to enforce? And the Home Secretary said, not yet. He said, well, get back to me when you have. And he told his printers to just keep printing until they ran out of money, ran out of paper, which they did. Now, he told them that from prison, because what did the state do? They locked him up for kidnapping children. Of course they did, right? That was their first move. But of course, the genie was out of the bag. Reform groups and prominent individuals called for an end to sexual commerce in minors. Dozens of protest meetings were held throughout England. Thousands of people, including wagon loads of virgins dressed in white, marched to Hyde Park. Spectacles, mainstream, piling on the stories, demanding that the bill be passed, and it was passed within weeks. Okay, this is how you change a culture in a manner that has a political/moral outcome, which we should all be about if we're serious about basically, reversing the slide to tyranny and putting it back to a slide to liberty. Right. So, I'm coming to the end, so I want to leave you with some takeaways here. Here's an important one. If you tell the right story to enough people, you don't have to argue with them. And moreover, the story is the thing that will make the ground fertile for whatever case you make when you do argue with them. Or maybe when you just share your view, which you will only do when you're asked to, by the way. Right? Most of political persuasion, it's not about making the watertight, fact-based, super logical case. Right? It's about getting the person who hears your case, however good it is, to want to believe you before you even open your mouth. As Jonathan Haidt would say, to have the bar set down here at, can I believe this person? Meaning, I want to believe what this person's about to tell me because I identify with them, rather than set up here at, must I believe, which means I don't identify with them, I don't trust their view of the world, don't really trust where they're coming from. So if I subconsciously can find one hole in what they're about to tell me, I've got my out. And that is how most people process most arguments they hear, especially when they're coming from a team or a tribe or a label that they aren't already identified with. Okay. Society-scale political change requires a large fraction of people to feel, not just believe the same thing. If you're a candidate, write this down. You win elections not by telling someone what you think, but by reflecting back to them what they already feel. If you doubt it, Donald Trump is in the White House. Let me just, if I may, how am I doing for time? How am I doing for time?
You got
all right. Now, there's more to it than what I'm about to say, but I'm going to put an idea in your head so that it festers over the next few days. Right? Do you remember when Donald Trump made that comment about, I'm sure everybody remembers, those Mexicans are not sending the best guys, it's the rapists and the blah, blah, blah. Right? And then, do you remember the media coverage over the next 48 hours? He's lost it now, it's over, game over, ha ha ha, we can write him off. And then by the end of the week, he was top of the pack of Republicans? Okay, let me explain that. The Mexicans aren't sending their best men, translated into the people who feel an injustice that he was reaching is, it isn't fair that people that break rules get stuff that people like you who don't break rules don't get. That's what it was in translation. A political open goal, and you can also write this one down, and if there's anyone from the LNC that's listening, please put this on a large banner above the door of every room you operate in. Now I've said that, I've forgotten what I was going to say. I'm not saying that. That'll teach me, won't it? That's justice right there. What was it saying? Justice. See, yes, why this is my...
The message of healing.
No, hold on. Most powerful guy.
Donald Trump said some really bad things about people that translate
Yes!
into...
Thank you, I've got it! Yes! Right. Yes, a political open goal. What is a political open goal? It's when there's an injustice, right, going on in a country or a community, this works at any level, any jurisdiction, right, it could be a city, right, that a critical mass, usually a majority of people feel, but that all of their mainstream political options are on the wrong side of. So with Donald Trump, that was immigration. It doesn't matter where you are politically, everybody knows that however you want to change immigration and deal with it, right? The Republican Party and the Democratic Party are together responsible for the mess that we're in. There's no option that who even saying anything, credibly, that are going to fix that. Everybody can look to history and say, okay, well, those two parties have made this mess. Brexit in England, right? All the mainstream political options, all those parties were like, we need more Europe to solve the Europe problem. Right? These are political open goals. Because what you do in that case is, you take the position of justice against the mainstream political options. So for Nigel Farage in Britain, the position was quite simple. Right? The Trump one, decoding, was simple. The Brexit version was simple. It just isn't fair that people that you can't vote out are making laws that change your lives. See how there's there's no even steps in the argument. It's so obvious. Most people believe that whether you're Democrat, Republican, Tory, Labour in England, right? It's speaking to into the injustice in a way that tells the person who's already feeling it that you feel it too. This is how you get people to believe you, right? I mean, back in when Rand Paul was running for the Republican nomination and Bernie Sanders for the Democrats in the last cycle, right? Bernie Sanders put out a great video actually about income and the absurd, as I think he called it, income and wealth distribution in the United States, which of course is a message that resonates hugely with a lot of his base, which is young students with tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars of student debt. And the video, let's say it was like 8 minutes long. First 5 minutes were just, it was nicely produced, a description of the problem that basically said to people who feel that there are things, you know, effed up about income and wealth distribution in the United States, which there are because we've had the bank bailouts, right? And we've got a student education finance system, right, that is, it's a gift to libertarians. It's a gift to capitalists. Like if you want an example of going anti-free market that has the opposite of the good intentions, look at student debt, right? It's a gift for any people who share our philosophy. It would have been a gift for Rand Paul, but Bernie Sanders made the video that that described the problem. And because he was the guy that described the problem, the human reaction is, right, whatever his solution is, that's the one I'm going with. Right? So then the last 3 minutes of his 8-minute video, his solution to the problem, were a bunch of solutions that we all know in this room are going to make everything worse. Now, Rand Paul could have written, or any one of us, could have made the same video, first 5 minutes, but put our solutions at the back end. Right? And we could have been as successful as Sanders. Just like Ron Paul was successful. Why was it that Ron Paul was filling those stadiums with tens of thousands of young people? He was the cultural change. You know, he was the 60s all over again, right? But the heir to that wasn't his son, wasn't Rand Paul with a similar philosophy. It was Bernie Sanders. I mean, demographically, culturally, right? Ron Paul was replaced with Bernie Sanders, right? That's because of this. We've got to get this right, right? Now, I say because of this. Going back to Nigel Farage, how do you get people to identify with you? Well, often culturally, not politically. If, you know, culture precedes politics. Everybody knew, the pundits, the political class, that UKIP, you know, Nigel Farage's pro-Brexit party wasn't going to do anything, you know, interesting in the European elections, wasn't going to sway enough people to get Brexit. Why? Because the politics of UKIP are kind of broadly centre-right. If you actually search through their website, probably, no, not now, but back when Nigel Farage ran it, you would see that they call themselves a small L, small d, libertarian, democratic party. Centre-right, basically. And so all the pundits said, well, the working class, you know, all those northern votes, right, blue-collar votes up north, which kind of equivalent to blue-collar in Ohio, Indiana, Pennsylvania, Michigan, these kind of places. These people vote Labour. They vote Democrat, eventually. They always vote Labour. Right? Labour politics are left-wing politics. They're socialist politics. These people aren't going to jump politically to UKIP, to a party that is pro-Brexit, and therefore to the Brexit that this right-wing party is pushing, because that was the only party pushing it. Did they jump? Yeah, they jumped. Yes, they jumped. Why? Because there was a cultural identification. Because when Nigel Farage made the case, it just isn't fair that people can make laws that you can't vote out and they live in Brussels and you're English and they've never even visited England. It's a damn simple case, doesn't take an argument. He was usually making the case with a beer in one hand and a cigarette in another, leaning against the bar, which is culturally exactly what those voters identify with. People don't shift their vote on policy. I'm sorry, it's not policy. How many people do you think who voted for Trump put him in the White House when, you know what, I'm going to check out on the website this Trump guy and see how many of his 12 platforms I'm actually in agreement with. Well, it's actually 9, that's great. I agree with him on the majority of the reason I'm going to vote for Trump. But that's not how he got in. Policy, of course, it's important. Of course, it's important we've got to be true to our principles when it comes to policy, because the whole point of winning is to enact policy. I'm never saying you ever sacrifice good policy. You never sacrifice principles for good messaging. But the best messaging goes to the core principle, which resonates with everybody at the most human level, unmediated by political ideology. And you know, we've got to get that right, because there are political open goals. They come and they go in towns and cities, counties, states across America and America itself. There's a big political open goal in America right now, right, which I'm happy to talk about afterwards. if anyone wants to ask me questions. Right, so a human story, a narrative about one or a few people engages empathy without creating cognitive resistance because it makes no moral claim. It doesn't try to argue anyone into a position. So it's safe. So my cognitive, psychological resistances, which are mostly subconscious, aren't up. Right? It doesn't put the person on the other side of the story about an injustice into a zero-sum game, which is what most arguments do. Okay. There's now a wonderful field of behavioral economics, which I recommend dabbling in if you're interested in changing people's minds, because it turns out that what people do isn't what they think they do. And we're doing a lot of experiments on what people actually do in different situations. And one of the important big takeaways from the discipline of behavioral economics right now that has political consequences is that people, regardless of what country they live in or whatever politics they espouse, will harm themselves somewhat to right an injustice. And you can set up a situation where they see an injustice just by the rules of a simple game that you create with 3 strangers in a room. And it's in the 80%, 83, 87% of people will actually pay a price. They'll actually go out of their way, right? They'll walk out of the lab with less money if they can experience themselves as setting right harm done by this person to that person. And they'll pay even more if they have some reason to identify with this person. But they will pay anyway. That's an astonishing thing. It goes, by the way, against old school, rationalist, classical economics. Now, this is another one to put on the board and see, and I'll try not to forget it before I actually say it. I want to make the claim, and I might be slightly wrong about this, but I'm sure I'm 99% right. Every historic stepwise increase in liberty was a consequence of defeating an injustice. Right? What was sold was the defeat of the injustice, not the added liberty. There's a reason the phrase is liberty and justice for all. They are flip sides of a coin. Thought experiment. Can you think of a situation where justice is increased without liberty being increased? Can you think of a situation where justice is reduced without liberty also being reduced? I don't think you can, because they're flip sides of a coin. Right? Now, we are primed to want to put right injustices, because an injustice is a violation of something we already feel we should have. And we all, it's that paradox of loss versus gain, right? It feels a lot worse to lose $100 than it feels good to gain $100. Right? To find it on the street. Yeah? This works in politics. This is the psychological anatomy, if you like, of people. The psychology of people that we have to understand if we're going to be successful in politics. So, I'm going to ask you this question. Now, you're libertarians. I'm not asking about libertarians. I'm asking about everybody out there who isn't yet a libertarian, right? I want you to think like them, if you can. If you are, I know it hurts, right? Which is why we're not doing enough, right? You've got to get used to it, right? Most people, if you ask them, would you compromise a little bit of justice for a little bit of liberty? What would they say? Now to flip the question, would you compromise a little bit of liberty for a little bit of justice? Everyone will say yes to the latter, and they think they're doing it all the time, right? They think they're doing it all the time. But the first is kind of practically, it's like an oxymoron. Like, no one would do that, right? No one would do it. No one would knowingly, willingly get a bit more freedom, right? Most people, I'm talking about people in this room, right? Knowing that it costs justice for anybody. Most people won't do that. And I'm just giving you that thought experiment. Again, I'm not saying it's 100%, this isn't 2 + 2 = 4 certainty, but it's not far off. I'm trying to give you different ways to intuit what I'm telling you is important when it comes to changing minds towards liberty. Right? I've given you a few kind of principles to hang your hat on, which I think are important. I've given you a few because some may resonate more than others. They all head in the same direction. I think that's all I want to leave you with. Now, if you want to get into this, okay, Robin, that's great. How do we do it? What do we do? What are the techniques? I do have a course online, weaponsofmasspersuasion.com. I've got flyers where if you're interested in this and you want to be able to go to kind of act on it, whether you're at the doorstep, whether you're writing speeches, knocking on doors, whatever it is. whatever kind of activist you are, maybe just take a look, weaponsofmasspersuasion.com. Thank you for your attention, I appreciate it. And I should also, if you do enjoy this way of thinking about not just liberty as philosophy, but liberty as actionable changing of the world, check out my book too, because it's really in that spirit. Thank you for your time. Absolutely, thank you. Sir, Joe. I can hear you anyway.
Okay, so I don't think you did yourself justice by talking about your program here.
I didn't, but you might.
No, I'm for you because
Thank
you didn't. I mean, what I was touching on in terms of having conversations with people and holding them accountable and tapping into that feeling is exactly, what you're teaching people is a massive mistake in the business world, frankly. So it's definitely happening in politics. And so anybody who's running for office or anybody who's helping somebody run for office, I mean, do they not need that program?
They definitely need that program. and you know what? To your point, if I may tie your point up with Carl's point, business has to get this right or they go out of business, right? Or they can't get it too wrong for too long, right? The only way we can give ourselves that incentive, or not incentive, but give ourselves that constraint, is to actually be more interested in winning, right, than, I don't want to say than anything else, because you never win at any price. Just like in business, you don't lie to make a profit, right? Similarly, we don't give up our principles, right? But it's got to stop being okay to be performing like this after 47 years. When Nigel Farage starts up another party, the Brexit Party, that in 8 days is top of the pack because he did exactly what I put on my slides, right? So yeah, we've got to make a choice. Like, I will give you an observation that I will make without comment. I wasn't in the room for all of today, but for the hour or so, 90 minutes maybe that I was in the room at the end of your business, the thing that I saw got most excitement was your adding taxation and theft to the platform.
Terrible messaging.
As I say, I'm observing it without comment. If you would like to know, if you would like to comment, I'll be happy to give it to you, not from this microphone. Because I actually have data on it.
It's terrible messaging.
Okay, well you said it. I know you're keen, and I get why you're keen. And by the way, I would say also, just because you don't say anything at a certain time doesn't mean you don't believe it or you're conceding it's not true. All I'm saying is, hold fast to the principle. But if we want the principle to not just be a statement of who we are, but something that changes the direction of this country, and if it changes the direction of this country, it changes the direction of the world, then all I'm saying is, let's give some time to thinking about when we pull out which ones. Because you can pull them out when the soil is fertile, or when it isn't. We can pull it out when, it's like you shoot your bolt, right? If you shoot your bolt too early, you've lost your bolt. If you don't hit the target, the bolt is shot, right? You never have to shoot the bolt. If you don't shoot it, you've got it. Yeah. There's a time to say taxation is theft. There's a time. I'm just saying that time will be determined by what your purpose is as an organization. And there are purpose and there's purpose and there's values. It's the purpose of an organization that's definitive, not its values. You can have a business, you can have an airline, you can have a university, you can have a football team with largely overlapping values, but they have different purposes, which is what makes them those things. What's the purpose of us? And it's not for me to say. It is not for me to say. It is for you to say. And this is a platform to make grand declarations. If you want, that is up to you. But I'm just saying, what you choose about the purpose is the thing from which all follows with respect to messaging, to the messaging you want. Because depending on the purpose, everything I've said might just not be relevant to you. Right? That's up to you, and I respect anybody in the room for any purpose if they're in the room for liberty. Right? But yes, I make that observation. Thank you.
I heard you talk about the data.
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
Well, to your last point, or the points that both of you made here. The first time I heard taxation is theft, it didn't resonate near as much as it resonates now. I mean, there's themes, there's ideas that the more you hear them, the more they become ingrained. And Let's see, at another seminar I was taught, repetition is the mother of learning. So the more you hear this message, the more maybe the taxation of theft is going to resonate and appeal to a broader audience than it might have the first couple times people hear it. And if that's not a good example, I'm sure that there are others that are better examples.
So I would say to that, in principle, you're right. What you said about that statement could be true of any statement. And whether it is depends on the statement, and there are actually studies on these statements, including that particular statement, and many other libertarian statements. So I would say you could be right, but the answer is in the data. And then the explanation of the data is really psychology. I mean, more or less, I'm bastardizing it. But yeah, I am not arguing that repetition is not a useful learning tool. I'm just saying that different things said at different the same thing said at different times to different people can have different effects.
Well, yeah, absolutely true. But I think there might be a cumulative effect over time.
Yes, and what I've just said goes for the cumulative effect over time.
All right.
Yeah.
I think I made my point.
Absolutely, sir. No, absolutely. It's a good point. It's a good point, sir.
Taxation of substance is a good thing to say to people who know that it is. It gets them riled up, but it may not be good for the people on the outside who don't accept that.
No, it forces them to think about
But it doesn't
okay, so let me, okay, now, okay.
It can actually strengthen their pre-existing ideas because they'll say, no, we need that for the military and helping the poor and all that. It actually might strengthen. It works for different people different ways, really.
But having a story
Everything works for different people different ways. I mean, and that is kind of to the point.
We need people to do both, really.
Yes, and so that is a very good point. Look, this is not an either-or proposition. Right? I'm not saying, because of this, never say taxation is theft, or don't put it in your platform. I'm not, that is up to you. Right? And we need, I mean, if you look at the suffragettes, I'll just take it out of this, right, just to make the point on principle. The suffragettes might have been successful, and you might have heard of them, because there were also suffragists. Right? There were the ones that used, let's say, more revolutionary means, and there were the ones that used more conventional means. There were ones that extended the hand, and there were the ones that made the establishment go, we better talk to those people extending the hand, because those other ones are dangerous. Right? Martin Luther King, right? Malcolm X. Right? There were examples of this in history. So please don't think I'm denigrating in any way the clear statement of the principled position or the corollary thereof. I'm not. I'm just saying we've also got to get this right. And I just made an observation. Yeah. So.
Try to make an observation.
These are dangerous, these observations. Shouldn't have gone down this path. Yeah.
There was a fellow years ago who had a book about the tipping point, how things are obvious to everyone, but then
Malcolm Gladwell, right?
Suddenly
Yeah.
there you make a tipping point.
Yeah.
We might be there in terms of marijuana laws. Do you have any thoughts about why it's taking so long, or what's
Why it's taking so long? Let me think about it, and then we'll have another conversation about it. Because I'm not going to come up with anything really clever just here off the top of my head. I've never been asked why it's taken so long. Because first of all, I need to spend some time thinking about the premise of the question, because I'm not sure it has relative to other things.
The premise is, here I was in high school a long time ago, and they were saying this will all be legal in 10 years. And then Reagan came along.
Oh, maybe you've answered your question. But I need to think on it. Yeah.
I have a question. So I am part of the Libertarian Party Sex Worker Rights Caucus and working to decriminalize sex work. So one of the biggest obstacles that we're facing and have been discussing and trying to figure out how to get this out there is how do you get people to align, empathize with a regular woman who decides to do this, a successful woman, a woman that's making a decent amount of money, she's not living in squalor. How do you get people to empathize with that and align with that and say that this is okay and I support this?
So again, I would want to go away and think about it. The first thing that comes to my head is I would find a mother. First thing I would do is find a mother with a daughter. And that is the same as many of the people, of regular American women, who can relate to her as a mother because she lives in a similar house, in a similar place, and has other aspects of her life that are very similar. And I would have her tell her story. And I would probably have I'd have a few of them, which with the stories involving, let's say, different degrees of sex work, right? And then I would start, I'd start at the easy end. The time, if I was working with you on this, I would want to find out what access you have to people, to women who would be brave. It doesn't have to be exclusive women, but I would start there. Who would be brave enough to actually put themselves forward to do that, right? And then it would be a question of, okay, let's go and get their stories. Then in the time it was taking us to get the stories, I will talk to you about the data you've already got, because you can't. These principles I'm very confident about. I've seen them work in in all kinds of places and throughout history, obviously. But the application for a particular purpose at a particular time, I always want to start with data. And sometimes you don't have it, right? So sometimes you can start with a reasonable segmentation of who you're trying to reach. But if you have data, I always want to start there. But yeah, that would be a whole kind of consulting project. Yeah. Any others? Yeah, one more.
So, I mean, the opposite of what you're saying, as far as we see Bernie Sanders having this, the story with a different ending, or we see a school shooting and now they want to take our guns, or we see the immigrant that caused crime, that that kind of thing. When we see stories like that, I mean, we obviously see the stories like that. Do we do anything, or do we just have better stories?
You've got to have better stories.
Okay.
I mean, you've got to at least have a story that's good, right? So, do you know what I mean? These stories can be so compelling. There's a John Stuart Mill quote, which I've always loved. He who knows only his own side of a case knows little of that, right? Now, John Stuart Mill is actually talking about arguments, rational discussions, but it works with stories too. Like, you can be so in the direction of somebody for some experience, right? But then you hear the other story of someone on the flip side of, let's say, that complicated set of circumstances, right? And you can be pulled in a different direction. So yeah, let's put it this way: if somebody has a nuclear weapon, I want a nuclear weapon, right? It's like, don't go to a nuclear war with a knife, right? Let's stop doing that, guys. That's kind of what I'm saying, I guess. Yeah, that's a good new encapsulation for my talk, right? When it comes to political messaging, don't go to a nuclear war, well, with a knife. Yeah. All right, thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.
Thanks for watching, everybody, and if you want to help support more videos like this, please go to the PayPal link attached and donate $1. Thank you.